Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So, what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Robin Demerath. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm on imperfect momming because I'm basically a stay-at-home mom. But what I do is my work is to take care of my oldest, who is 18, but I am guardian to her, and taking her and her other siblings is pretty much a full-time job because they all have additional special needs. So in addition to that, I do kind of freelance advocacy work, and it keeps me busy just being a mom, but it ties together. It's what I do. I take care of them.
Yeah.
And
Tell me a little bit about the advocacy stuff, and then we can go back to.
well, currently I am going back to school to get my bachelor's and associate in social work so that I can actually kind of market myself as a consultant. Right now, it's pretty much I volunteer my time for a service dog trainer to connect her with clients that could use the assist in self-training. I do a lot of I'm on a lot of committees for programs in Wisconsin to like give my input as a parent where I see the need, where we could do some work. One of the biggest ones is called Circles of Life, and it's a yearly conference for families with special needs children. Um, and I get involved where I can when things come up, like we have the voter disability vote association. I get into some of the classes there and try and get people registered, that because just because you have an intellectual disability doesn't mean you don't have a vote. So we get these people to understand their rights and see if this is something they want to do and support that. So a lot of little things that I do because I kind of have to temper my time with what my kids need, because that changes daily.
Yeah. And you said you have four?
Three.
Three, and all of them have
Yeah,
some degree of.
my two older kids are autistic. My oldest has a couple additional mental health diagnoses that we're working on, like narrowing down so we can get her the proper treatment. And the younger two both have Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder. So it just means a lot of doctor's appointments to just keep. Sorry if you hear the dog in the background. He found a bone.
We have a couple of dogs, and they frequently make
Yeah.
their guest appearance.
But yeah, there's a lot of varied needs in this house, and I think my job title could be considered chaos coordinator, because that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah.
Officially, I am paid to be my oldest caretaker, but I was doing this before I was actually paid for it, and so.
Yeah, we were just on a call this morning. We do a weekly parent support call that's open to the public, and my partner just had this thought come in that it's like, we're parents, and we're not necessarily social workers, we're not therapists, we're not all of these things, but we become those things. An advocate was another one.
Yeah.
We become these things because that's what our kids need.
Yeah.
And then, but going into it, I don't think I know a single person that thought, well, I know that when I have a kid, I'm going to be their advocate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, where we thought,
No.
and so we put on these roles, or we take on these roles that we're unqualified for, and that are really important. And so, I
Parenting
honor
is
you
like
for everything that you're doing for your kids, for sure.
parenting is like the most on the job training ever, honestly.
And it's the most important job as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned. Yeah. Yeah. So what is it that so you said that you just started a podcast. Is that
Yep.
what is the topic of your podcast?
It's called the ADA Cafe, and it's essentially going to be talking about living with disabilities in this society and this kind of health framework. And I just want to open up discussions about if there's a need, like bring on a person that this is their experience. And by doing that, someone else that might be kind of at the start of their journey can get some resources. Because
Hmm.
it's such a vast topic that I'm never going to run out of people to talk to about it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, my son and I have had he was diagnosed when he was 3, and he was very borderline. That they actually said, we're going to give him the diagnosis because he could go either way. Like, it's kind of, he's so on the line that we don't know, but he'll get support if he has the diagnosis. And so I went to a parent support meeting at his school, like his after school program, his services. And one of the topics was, do you tell your child that they have autism or not? And that was one of the questions. And I hadn't even thought about it at that point. He's 3 or 4, or maybe 5 at that point. And it didn't cross my mind. And so it was not something that I like sat him down and said, okay, you have autism, and it was like one day he was like, what's autism? And I'm like, I still can't answer that question very well. Um, and I think the way that I answered it was that it just means that you process things differently, or you think differently, or something along those lines. And that was good enough for him at the time. And then recently, um, I guess kids are using you're autistic the same way that they used to call people retarded. And so because he knows that he has that diagnosis and he's feeling a little defensive by the insult, he's like, well, I don't have autism. Or autism doesn't exist. Not that he doesn't have it, but autism doesn't exist. And it's an interesting world to navigate, for sure.
because in some ways they have all the community online to be like, this is normal, this is a superpower, it's great, but you're still going to have those kids who say them. I mean, you're always going to have kids that say mean things. It's just what wording can they use? What thing can they focus on? And to be honest, like when I tell my kids or when we talk about it, it's like everybody processes things differently. And I focus on the positives, like you see things I can't, and that allows for better discussions. So I'm like, if someone's being weird because you're autistic, well, then they're just being closed-minded. So we just keep having those kind of discussions that it's like, sometimes my son's a perfect example. He's so intelligent. He has such interesting interests. And I keep have to tell him, I can't keep up with you. I mean, that's really cool. You are so smart and you are so like dynamic. Mom's too slow,
Mm.
and I'm like, I don't feel bad about that, but can you work with me to help you like understand it? So it's like it's not a bad thing. It's just different.
Yeah.
And some kids, my son's like, yeah, it's my superpower. My daughter, she takes it harder, you know. So,
Yeah, every child is different, and I remember a meme or a picture a long time ago that said if you've met one child with autism, you've met one
one
child with
child.
with
Yeah.
autism. Like there is no universal. And yeah, I even last night I told my son, he's like, I need help, I might need help on the homework, and I was like, I mean, yeah, I'll
I'll
do my
try.
best. But we're talking middle school math. I am 30 years ahead of you in,
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
the same anymore.
no.
And I sucked at math back then, so sorry, buddy.
Right. And I was decent at it, but it's like I don't remember. I just don't remember. It's you use it or you lose it kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But um and even the kids that the kid specifically, I don't know if there's more than one, but I know that there's one that was using it as a derogatory slang. He doesn't know that Xander has autism. Like it's just a word that he's throwing out to be an
Yeah.
insult. Um, and but because he knows, then
Yeah.
he's
It
taking
hits
offense
it.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But his response was everybody thinks differently. That's why it doesn't exist. And I was like, I'm not going to argue with you that the existence or not. I believe that it's the label is there to help us. Um, and that was another conversation that my fiance and I were having like a lot of people are getting diagnosed as adults now.
Yeah.
And um maybe I don't know so much with autism, but just what I've heard a lot now is the ADHD that adults
Yeah.
are being diagnosed a lot with it. And it's like, so what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to use it to empower you to like learn the tools that help people with ADHD function
Yeah.
better or more? I'm trying to think of the word, but like more
Just
efficiently, maybe
yeah.
more
Yeah.
effectively. Um, or are you going to use it as like, well, I have ADHD, so I can't do blah blah blah, you
And
know?
every kid's going to be different. Like I think I parent my kids fairly evenly. I mean, every kid's different, so obviously I have to do things to adjust to them. But I have one child who it's like I use that as an excuse to get out of stuff all the time. Another child who's like it's just who he is. So if he's saying he doesn't want to do something, he's just because I don't want to do something. There's not I'm not using this label to cripple myself,
Hmm.
you know. And then it was odd because my youngest doesn't have an autism diagnosis, but she is neuroatypical. And yesterday, her brother was like, just kept, it caught my attention how pointedly he kept saying, you have two kids in the car with autism. His older sister was not there, his younger sister was. And I was like, I wasn't going to correct it for a while. I want to see where it was going. And not once did she take offense to that. She's like, she asked me later, she's like, am I autistic? I didn't know I was. And I'm like, I don't think you are, but it's just a word. So she's like, oh, yeah, okay. We like to use the term that this household is neurospicy.
Nice. I love that.
you know, like every single individual has idiosyncrasies. Ours are just a little extra sometimes,
Mhm.
but we make it work. And I do think that helps them go out into the bigger world and look at others are different. Because sometimes you might look at someone without autism and be like, what are they doing? Because that doesn't make sense, or
Mhm.
they have some reason. We just
Yeah.
don't know it. So,
And I think that all of us that part of the journey of life is figuring out and learning yourself, right? Learning
yeah.
how you tick. And for some people, the label really helps them understand themselves more. And so I'm all for it when it's
when it's
something,
needed. Yeah.
yeah, when it's something that helps and supports and whatnot. Would you say that there was any moments that you felt guilty about having children with neurodivergence?
Not where their diagnosis comes in. I have plenty of mom guilt. It just doesn't really tie to their diagnosis,
Hmm.
except a little bit when they first got their physical diagnosis for the Ehlers-Danlos. Because for that one, I'm like, I know that could lead to my children having a lifetime of pain issues. And
Hmm.
I'm like, there's guilt, but there's nothing I had to do with that. Like, and then I really had to go through this. Was I angry with my parents? I just won the genetic lottery. Those two, same thing. It was nothing that I could have changed.
Hmm.
But I had some guilt in the beginning of that. As far as the autism, the guilt I might have had was that I missed it because it wasn't my understanding of autism at first. I had went to school 20 years ago and was going to do special education. And because I started having health issues, I didn't finish that curriculum. I was like 2 credits short of my degree. And what I understood to be autism was way less functioning than what I saw in my own children. So I feel like I dropped the ball initially in getting my kids the help because there's nothing wrong. Well, there's still
Hmm.
nothing wrong with them, but if I hadn't like avoided, there might be something that they could use help with, we would have gotten it sooner. But
Yeah.
again, they've gotten good therapy. They've had access to stuff that's really like we still have hard times, honestly. But we do the OT. We go to, whatever I think my kids need, I'm gonna dig and they're gonna get it. And I feel like, life just put us on hard mode, but doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. So,
It's so funny that you said hard mode because that was the phrase that my son used last night going from elementary school to junior high. He was like, we went from easy mode to hard mode overnight. Like you can't just
yeah.
do that.
I want some cheat codes, please.
Right? Where's the cheat codes for junior high? Yeah, that's funny. Um, I love using the analogy of gaming for life, especially with this generation.
Yeah.
Because they're just I don't know that there's really very many kids nowadays that don't play some kind of video game. And I mean adults too. Like I remember saying, I don't like video games, and my stepmom was like, I see you playing them on your phone all the time. And it literally didn't click in my head that what I was doing on my phone was a video game.
Yep. It's just a different format, but
Right. Yeah. But I think that there is actually a people who like gamify life. Like it's a thing. It's an actual thing. I remember hearing, I was like, that's kind of cool. Or you can gamify your business or gamify your content or it's like and it makes it kind of fun.
it takes some of, for me at least, when I use that analogy with the kids, it takes some of the unknown out of it. Like sometimes you're going to miss that jump and you're going to fall, but were you having fun,
Mhm.
And video games, you get to just start over and come back. Like if you fall down a hole, maybe not in real life, but you fall down, you get to start over. You're in charge of where, take a break if you need, but you're in charge of where you need to jump back in. And I think that clicks, especially with my two younger kids, that the youngest one has some, I'll call it regulation issues. When she gets mad,
Mm.
it's rapid, it's intense. I understand the trigger to it just about every time, but it ends up being more of a problem for her than the problem was.
Mm.
And, sometimes I'm like, oh, time to hit the reset, like we can come back to this. Let's just set it down, and if she has something in her head that she can like it's not just me feeling this. This just a thing that's happening. I didn't do it, because guilt is what gets her all built up.
Mm,
Let's hit the reset button so she can just feel it and come get a hug instead of feel bad about it and then rage at herself and just get into a bad cycle.
yeah. That's interesting that you noticed the guilt in her too. I hadn't thought about kids feeling guilty. I'm all about the mom guilt, but like my yesterday my son and I were talking about, kind of his grades in school, and I had a moment where I I got into a trigger, and that kind of sent me on a spiral, and then I wanted to um not just apologize, but I kind of wanted to like say like let's do this like special thing, because like I know that I could have handled the situation a little bit better. And so I said ice cream and he said donuts um in the morning, and I was like, I'm down for donuts in the morning, and he said, can I have two? And I was like, sure. And he's like, am I getting too like I feel bad because I think I said that I was gonna go because I wake up at 5 and they open at 4. So I was like, I'll just go before everybody's awake instead of trying to rush out of the house
Yeah.
when it's like we barely get out on time anyway. Like I'll just go earlier. But he like I saw that feeling guilty in that moment because because I offered to get donuts at 5 in the morning, but was interesting.
I say my mom guilt, and it's not so guilt, is like, oh, am I doing this right?
Hmm.
Sense comes up a lot now that they're coming to this age that I know they can do more, but I've been in such a habit of doing for them that I'm like, I don't want to throw it at them, but I need to start layering some responsibilities, because otherwise I'm doing them a disservice by like throwing them out in the world at 18 with no skills. And it's like, okay, I have to pick my battles every single day and differently with every single kid. And
I mean, the
I,
awareness is huge that you're aware that you're doing a lot of things for them and that you can't just shove them into doing it all themselves. And I mean, that's awesome. And like, I literally have to stop myself when he struggles to get his shoe on or when he struggles to open something. Like, I have to
like, step
hold,
back.
I have to hold, literally, I have to hold my hands so
Yep.
that I wait for him to ask.
I'll call this an upside, but the amount of therapy my kids have been in, that I've just sat in the corner and gotten secondhand therapy to figure out
Mm.
how they're working, has actually like been huge. Because this is where I kind of get this stuff that I'm like, I wouldn't have seen that because I would have been too far in my own head. Make sure they have all their needs. Am I doing a good enough job? And what I'm learned over the last couple of years is the best thing I can give them is to let them know I'm gonna screw up too,
Mm.
and to be willing to like own that, have those conversations when I'm like, guess what? I haven't had you do your own laundry for years, but you are physically old enough, capable, and mom actually needs help. And I know that you offer help all the time in areas I don't need it or I don't take it. So I know you're willing. Let's just do this. And because I don't just jump and say, go do your wash, it takes a little bit to form the habits, but we haven't had a lot of friction. And I still feel like some of that comes with me not asking enough, but we'll figure it out.
I mean, it's done is better than perfect,
Yeah, always.
and improving as we go that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, my youngest has taught me that too, because I've had to constantly tell her, you don't have to be perfect. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. And as much as I say it, I have to start listening to it at some point.
Yeah.
And the others hear me say it, the others see me start adjusting. And yeah, for all the spicy in here, we've kind of learned how to use it to our advantage.
Yeah. I love the spicy. What did you say? Spicy
Neuro
diaper?
spicy.
Neuro spicy. Thank you. That's so cool.
Yeah, because I don't have a diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure I have some form of, it's probably something like ADHD, but I have CPTDS, CPTSD from
Mhm.
like way back in my childhood, and a lot of those things mirror. So
Mhm.
even though I may not have it, I get my kids in a way that someone who was neurotypical wouldn't understand. I get sensory overloaded, but I have three kids who sometimes vocally stim, sometimes are like touch. So anybody would have that after a certain point. It took me a while to get that's what's happening.
Mhm.
And to like, perfect example, advocate for myself. Hey kiddo, I love you, but I'm going to put on some headphones. So if you really need me, just tap and I'll take a break. But it's like, you're not doing anything wrong by constantly humming, but my brain is done processing it. So,
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The beatboxing that my son does, like unconsciously drives my fiance bonkers. I have the ability to tune it out now. It's just like I just can, but like I don't even notice he's doing it. But I do notice when the radio gets turned up, and I was like, oh, okay. He must
you
be
know,
doing
those
it.
tools that work for the kids, a lot of times,
Uh-huh.
I found I'm buying two when they're suggested. Like they're noise reduction things that go in your ears. They asked me to try that out with my son because he's auditory sensitive. That's
Hmm.
why I stuck one in. I'm like, oh my God, why am I so chill today? I'd
Hmm.
had him in all day, so it was like all the noise was still coming. It just wasn't so intense. So it hadn't fried my nervous system by the end of the day. So I'm like,
That's really cool.
yeah,
Yeah, and I like you said something earlier. I think that the best gift that we can give to our kids is to let them know that they're not perfect, that we are not perfect, because as a default to like the way that we come into the world and the fact that we have people who raise us, like we're dependent on them, and they're essentially our parents are like gods to us. And so if a parent yells at a child, the child, like, just because the parent is yelling, not because the child did something wrong necessarily,
yeah,
like that they will internalize it and say, like, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Because parent is synonymous with God, and
yeah.
for a long time. And so it's in adulthood where we realize, oh, my parents are not perfect. But by then, a lot of the damage is already done to our self-esteem and all of that. So I think that's a huge gift to give to your kids, to let
Yeah.
them know that you're not perfect.
And it makes a difference to me too,
Mm.
because
It's a nice reminder.
I, yeah, take off some of that weight. Um, I had decent parents. They were loving, but we grew up where they had to work all the time. So, like I'm constantly available for my kids and I stayed at home, and I have to recognize that puts me even more as a caregiver, and like they relied on me more because they were able to. So I'm like, no shade to my parents, but I learned stuff that my kids are having to learn because I'm having to actually teach it by example. And I have to step back once in a while and be like, oh, yeah, I just did this at their age. I can't expect them to know that if I don't show them that. And if I get up, I remember if my dad got upset with me, and he wasn't a yeller, he wasn't, but if he got, I was just devastated.
Yeah.
And so I have to remember, like, I don't yell at my kids. So why do they break down and cry? Because I was just, oh, yeah. So like those moments occasionally click that they they still view me as this, on a pedestal person. And I'm like, I don't. And that makes a weird cross section of, okay, well, I'm going to hop off here. You put me here and let's go sit on it together or sit down here together. We do not. No, you're perfect too, as much as you think I am. Now let's just figure it out.
Mhm. I love
But
that.
you don't always see it when you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
Outside of let your kids know you're going to make mistakes and it's okay if you do and they do. The biggest one is find some support for yourself.
Mm.
Um, I would not be getting through this without my people. I'm single parenting these three, and if I didn't have, the person to call at 9 o'clock at night and frankly be like, oh my God, they're crazy, and vent to them, then I may not be as kind and compassionate the next day when they start out that way, and
Mhm.
they're not doing anything different, but this person also is often the one that checks me and is like, yeah, but how's that any different than any other day? What's going on different with you? What do you need? And that reminds me of that self-care portion and, you know, find your people, rely on them when you need to, and it makes a difference. So, even if you have
Absolutely.
to dig for them,
Yeah, I've said many times on the podcast, like it takes a village to raise kids, and
Absolutely.
just because we're in the US and we don't do that doesn't mean that it's not true and that we don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Uh, One that comes to mind, I think it was just the timing, and it clicks to mind because the title always makes me snicker, is You Are a Badass. And if I can remember it's essentially just telling you to like stop doubting yourself. You're probably your biggest roadblock. And I read that probably 6 or 7 years ago, but it was at a time where I'm like, my marriage was not going to last much longer if something didn't change. And I was constantly in self-doubt.
Mhm.
And it just like hit me like, I'm not the only one that thinks like this. So maybe I need to look at this from a different perspective. So it's a good book. Um, but I think it really was just the timing that it came to me that's why it sticks out.
Yeah. I'm a huge Jen Sincero fan. I have all of her books,
That's yeah.
and yeah, when she um so the book is in its 10th year anniversary, so she republished it with a new chapter. And I got to see her speak in Southern California, and it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience, and so I have a signed copy of her book.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for not just everything that you said on this podcast, but everything that you're doing in support of other parents. Um, and also everything that you're doing with your kids. Like moms don't hear it enough, and you're
Yeah.
doing an amazing job. So
Well, you are too. I found you because I was looking for people doing this kind of stuff.
yeah,
So thank you for having me on.
absolutely. And if where can our listeners find you if they wanted to reach out?
Um, I only have my trailer out on Spotify right now, but I will be posting things in the next month for the ADA Cafe. But if they want to look into more of what I'm doing across the board, I do have a website called The Wobbly Warrior. It's thewobblywarrior.com. And
That's cute.
projects that I'm going to dive into are going to go on there.
Yeah,
Some of
awesome.
the links to the um, disability like support groups and stuff are on there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that and for everything else. And there will be another episode of Imperfect Mommying coming for y'all next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Mommying. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.